Thanks everyone for being here and welcome. For those who don't know me, my name is Itzi Maricourt. I am also part of the Lexington League of Women Voters, and a special thank you to Logan and Michael and Ashley for being willing to join us tonight. So Jen said we're recording. I also wanted to say we had allotted some time for us to do some breakout groups at the end of the sort of more formal session, but with the group this size, we can stay in, in this one group and sort of treat all of this a little more informally. And I'm noticing Ashley's back. Okay, great. So our goal really today is and let me back up. Let me say that we don't record the breakout rooms. Those are meant to be conversational spaces. So our goals today are really to think together about the uneven history of voting rights in our country. We want to hear from three very different kinds of voters in our community here in Lexington and get their perspectives. And then just make sure all of us here are on the same page, or at least have a plan for how we're going to be voting in this election in just a few days now, literally. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that. And all credit for making these beautiful slides goes to Jen Jackson, who, in addition to everything else that she does, makes these really beautiful slides. And my thinking in sharing these is just to preface our conversation on voting by grounding myself and grounding all of us in the fact that, voting is something we talk about a lot and in some cases take for granted, but, there has been an uneven history of who gets to vote in our country. And many people have fought and are still fighting, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, both to increase the right to vote, and there are also some people, unfortunately, fighting to limit the right to vote for others. And so that's something we're aware of as a group, and hopefully also as individuals as we're coming into this conversation. And the second reason we put the slide up here is just to situate ourselves that this is also a conversation about who has power and who doesn't, right? And certainly voting is an act of exercising power, but also granting or expanding the right to vote or limiting it is inherently about who has power and who gets to make decisions in our country. And I think we should all understand and know that, like I said, the history of voting in our country has been uneven, starting with white men who owned property, right? Who were the first people who were able to vote. And then that right has gradually expanded since then to include other people. And so for those of you who are newer to the league, I'm trying to advance my slide here and I'm not sure what I'm doing. Hold on. I'm a teacher and I teach by Zoom, and this is like welcome to all of my classes. So I'm like, how do I advance the slide? Okay, there we go. So the League of Women Voters was founded in 1920 and was founded when women were granted the right to vote, with the mission being to educate and support women in exercising this right. And, I also want to flag that when women got the right to vote, some women got the right to vote, right? It wasn't all women who were able to vote at that time. And so our name is a nod to the past. We're working and have worked since our founding to extend the right to vote to other people. And we do welcome everyone and all potential voters to our group. And I will say, I joined the League of Women Voters because I'm a naturalized US citizen, and the League of Women Voters were at my citizenship ceremony, and they're the people through whom I signed up to vote for the very first time. And so it's a special organization to me personally. And sort of in the spirit of sort of talking about the league expanding the right to vote, hopefully you can see the next slide now. This work is ongoing. So you all may know already that Kentucky is one of 3 states that has taken away permanently the voting rights of people who have felony convictions. And so even after these individuals have served a complete sentence, they're not allowed to vote again. I don't know, sort of asterisk that. In that, to say there is a 2019 executive order that automatically restored voting rights to people with non-violent felony convictions, but there were no mechanisms in place for notifying people who had gotten their voting rights back. And so the league has been working with the Voting Rights Coalition to get the word out to people so that they can vote once more. So I'm going to actually stop there with the history of voting rights and talk to you a little bit about like the three wonderful people who are sharing their perspectives with us as voters. And so I'm gonna tell you a little bit about them in alphabetical order, and then I'll turn it over to Mary Hughes to moderate a conversation with them. And we're hoping this can be informal. We would love to hear everyone's perspectives and thoughts. Mary will have a few questions, and then we'll open up the floor so that we're a small group so that we can have a conversation. So our first panelist is Logan Justice, and oh, he's coming back on. I see him. So Logan was born and raised in Kentucky. He is a 2022 graduate from Paul Laurence Dunbar High School and now attends the University of Kentucky, where he is studying public policy and integrated strategic communication. In high school, Logan served as the 2020-2021 FCC LA National Vice President of Membership. He was a member of the Kentucky Department of Education Student Advisory Council, and he worked on the Lieutenant Governor's Student Mental Health Initiative. I don't think Logan slept in high school is the summary I have come to. So at UK, Logan is the Student Government Association Government Relations Coordinator and Smile Club Director of Development. So welcome, Logan. Thanks for being here. Our second speaker is Ashley McLean. And Ashley currently serves as the operations manager at Revive Life House in Nicholasville. And she and her husband, John, are also members and serve on the leadership team at Kingdom Life Fellowship. She is 4 years and 5 months sober. And although she previously lost her voting rights, she has had them restored as of 2020. Ashley very much sees her calling as one to instill hope in others and spends her time doing just that. And we have a picture of her, and I should say, hopefully you can see pictures of the 3 speakers on the slides. She's pictured here with her husband, John, and her 3-year-old, Graham. So welcome, Ashley. And then finally, our third speaker is Michael Potapov, who was born in Russia and moved to the US in 1999. So after graduating from Georgetown College in 2005, he pursued a career in investment management, recently opening his own firm, Burl Investment Management LLC, here in Lexington. He serves on the boards of directors for the Bluegrass Land Conservancy, Trees Lexington, and Chamber Music Festival of Lexington. He is a member of the investment committee for the Bluegrass Community Foundation. He's married to Nancy Barnett and enjoys walking his 2 dogs and serving his 2 cats. So thank you, Michael. Thank you, Logan. Thank you, Ashley. I'm going to turn it over to Mary to ask you all a few questions and start our conversation.
All right. The first question I have for each of you is that we'd like each of you to tell us a little bit about yourselves, and in particular, tell us about your path to becoming a voter in the US and/or Kentucky. So we can start with Ashley. Ashley, are you ready? Is she there? Yeah, there she is. I don't hear her. Is she on mute?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi guys, I'm so sorry. So
Okay.
thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it so much. As she said, my name is Ashley. And like my bio said, I had my voting rights revoked. I am a convicted felon who my voting rights were revoked because I'm a convicted felon. However, I was given I can't think of the word, drawing a blank, but basically my charges don't show up on my record because I walked out a probation for 5 years. And so once I did that, my voting rights were restored in 2020, like it says. And so voting's been important to me since I was young. My sister actually is a journalist and she wrote a column about it. So through my addiction, obviously voting wasn't so important to me. I was focused on other things, making bad choices. And so when my voting rights were restored, it was very exciting. And it was just a really big deal. So I'm just really grateful to be here, and I'm thankful that you all asked me to participate.
Great. Thanks so much, Ashley. All right, let's go on. Let's go on to Logan. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your path to becoming a voter?
Oh, wait, hang on. Let me change the little spotlight here. No. All right, I'm working on it. Sorry. There we go.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you all for inviting me here. So I turned 18 in February, so this will be like my first like larger election, so I'm super excited about that to vote in. But I think my kind of what led me to want to vote, become like, registered to vote and stuff was a few things, but definitely one was definitely my parents. They always voted and kind of instilled in us that we should vote as well, and exercise that, responsibility. And then the second one is like what actually not forced me, but like kind of pushed me to actually register. I knew when I turned 18 I wanted to, but what really kind of like pushed me there was in my internship in the lieutenant governor's office. I was interning with her deputy chief of staff, and so it was kind of like I was about to end my internship and she was like, well, your last job before you go is you have to register to vote. And so I was like, I can do that. And so that was like kind of like my final stepping stone, I guess, into like what actually pushed me to do it, even though I knew I wanted to do it and get it in before the actual election. But I've always really loved being involved, whether that be in school or whether that be, in your community. And so I think being able to vote is one of like the, I guess, cornerstones or like foundational things of being involved in your community and having a voice of like, what you would want to see. So, yeah.
Great. And I just wanted to say that Logan was a big help when the league went to the University of Kentucky campus. We were there 3 days doing voter registration. And he was very much our go-to person. He was always there if we had problems or whatever. So he helped us
Well,
get
not
set
as
up.
much as you all. You all definitely helped the UK community register a lot of people. So we thank you all for that as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, great. Okay, thank you, Logan. Let's go on to Michael. Michael, can you tell us a little bit about your path and how you became a citizen and registered to vote and that type of thing?
Certainly. Thanks for having me, Mary and Zitzi. So I came to the United States in 1999 and became a citizen in 2008. And now that Zitzi said it, I think it was the League of Women Voters who signed me up to vote or allowed me the opportunity to sign up right there after the naturalization ceremony. So yeah, Russia has had a history of either non-voting or fraudulent voting, and so participatory democracy is something that is very special and I wanted to be a part of it. And so when I had the opportunity, I wanted to make sure I took part. And it's always amazing to me that only something like 20% of the voters show up to actually express their will and select their representatives. So it's important to me. So I've voted in every election since 2008 that I was able to vote in.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I believe, did you do some, or did you help the administration in Frankfurt with some things about voting? Is that correct? I mean, were you a spokesperson or something about voting, or am I?
Well, my wife, Nancy Barnett, organized a rally to encourage voting several months ago. And so I spoke at that rally.
Right.
Yeah, that was the extent of my contribution.
Well, that sounds good. Sounds good. All right. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about preparing to vote. Ashley, is there anything in particular that you do to prepare to vote?
Well,
how do you get your
yes.
information?
Well, actually, yesterday I just verified that I was registered to vote. So that's step one. I make sure I'm registered. And then I have been really researching the candidates. I was just talking to my sister about whether there was a really easy way to find out who the candidates are and, you know, like a bio, what they stand for, what their major political points are. And I was just really surprised to see, maybe I just don't know, that there wasn't a real easy way to find that. And so I've just been doing research and trying to find out who, you know, really what's important to me as a voter and a female voter at that is, since I have my voting rights restored, I'm an advocate for people who struggle with alcoholism and addiction, and the importance of second chances for people like myself. And so that's, you know, I really am drawn to those who are advocates of second chances and are really compassionate about recovery.
Great. I was going to ask first a personal question. Do you live in Lexington, or where do you vote? Ashley?
I live in Danville.
Oh, okay.
Kentucky.
Okay. Vote411.org is a national platform to get information about those that are running. Now, not everyone that is running has given information to Vote 411, but the league tries to get as much as possible. So that's also a good resource for you and everybody else.
Great, thanks.
Are your friends?
Yes, it is, very much.
Nonpartisan voter guide. All right.
Mary?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
This is Sharon.
Sharon.
You're right about the Vote 411. It will give information. In Danville, it will give information on people who are running for offices within the state, like for the House and for the state Senate and also national offices. But it will not be giving information about the local candidates. For example, if there's a mayoral race or something like that, it will not have that information right now. Am I right about that?
That'll
Jen?
be coming soon, Sharon. So we actually collected
Is it coming out? Okay.
We collected all the email addresses for all the races in the entire state. So
right, I know we did
7,100 and some odd like email addresses. So you know, it's also a matter of candidates and, you know, filling out the questions that we send them. So
right,
so if you're not seeing candidate answers, always reaching out to candidates and encouraging them to participate. And if they did not, for whatever reason, if they did not happen to receive the invitation or lost it, they can always reach out to us at Vote 411. I'll put it in the chat. Vote 411 at lwvky.org. And
now,
the invitation.
okay. In Lexington, we've had about a 50% response rate for local elections as far as the candidates providing the information we requested. And I think in areas where there's not an active league, that percentage is lower. So they're really, it would be great to be contacting some of those people and say, you know, we'd really like for you to fill this out.
Sounds good. Logan, do you have a plan about how you get prepared to vote?
Yeah, so very similar, and it might just be the student in me, but I kind of like to have like a study guide for, you know, what I am going to be expecting, or like what I should expect when I walk in there. And so, I believe they're on either like the Secretary of State site or the county clerk sites, or also you could just search like sample ballots for whatever race you're looking for. And so that's always what I go to, just to kind of get a feel of like, you know, what's even on the ballot. A lot of times, you know, I know especially um, in Kentucky, our years and our races aren't necessarily like match up specifically. For like our bigger races, they're on like odd years or something.
Mhm.
So I think knowing one, what even is going to be on the ballot's important, as well as like, you know, what races, what are they trying, like what are they trying to accomplish? Do they, some, a lot of, or I've noticed that a few don't even have people running against them. So I think that's also kind of important to know as like, you know, someone in your community. You know, they might think, you know, they're going to win, so why even run against them? Well, it's important to kind of see, you know, maybe someone else has a different viewpoint that you could encourage to run, or whatever that may be. But so definitely looking at sample ballots and then going from there of like, you know, you probably know some on there you recognize, you know, you're going to vote for them, but those ones that, you know, don't necessarily think about. I know one that kind of surprised me was like the water conservation officers, I
Mhm.
believe. So kind of looking and diving into that could be like a little interesting kind of activity to do during the day. But yeah, I think those are definitely my kind of go-to ways to learn
Good.
about who's going to be running and stuff.
Yeah, and for everybody, there's some information in the chat about various places that you can go. But Logan, specifically, if you want to hear the two candidates for water commissioner um, in our community forum, all you have to do is go to lwvlexington.com and look under candidate forums. And there's a half hour where they answered questions.
I'll do
So
that.
you'll get some real good information there, I would think.
And there's
So,
actually quite a few candidates. I think it's one of those where there's, I can't remember off the top of my head, there might be like 6, pick 3,
there's
or
different
4,
areas.
pick 2,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah. Sounds good. Okay, thanks, Logan. How about you, Michael? What kinds of things do you do to prepare?
Yeah, so collecting information on candidates is always a bit of a hunt, but my resources have been the payroll leader in Lexington, so Kentucky.com. They do make it typically free to access even without a subscription, and discussion of candidates and their positions. Civic Lex does a website, lex.vote, that does a good job. And then I do, for those that I want to dive a little bit deeper, I do go to the campaign websites and read up on platforms to understand. But yeah, for some, it's a little challenging, and it's a time commitment to sit through sessions, you know, such as you suggest, the forums and so on. So some can go on for quite some time, as I can attest from personal experience. So, you know, some of the summaries are very helpful.
Great, good. There was a great question in the chat. Jen, do you want to talk a little bit about write-in candidates and about information on them? Do you mind talking about that real briefly, and then we'll get back to questions?
Here, I'm gonna unmute myself. Yeah, sure. So, so write-in candidates is a very interesting thing. There's actually quite a few write-in candidates that are registered for this election. And so there are options on the, I was just looking for my ballot here. I've got it. And So there's different races where you can potentially, there'll be options, like you can pick 1, 2, or put a write-in. But your candidates that you write in have to be registered with the county clerk. So you can't just be like, hey, I think my friend Ted wants to run for office, and I'm just gonna like put his name down. That won't be counted. So, but they're in the deadline for registering to be as a write-in candidate is later. And so but essentially they didn't get in time to be able to be printed on the ballot. But if you go to the county clerk's website, there is a listing for all of the candidates that are eligible to be written in as write-in candidates. And we're actually, I created an action that's going to go live on our outreach circle that'll link directly to that. And I will put the link in the chat. I just had it up here a few minutes ago. But that's also an option too, because what may be presented on the ballot, there may be 2 choices, and you're like, I don't know if I'm digging either of these choices. You may want to check in to see if there is a write-in candidate and investigate that candidate if you think that candidate may be more to your liking or not. So it's always just a good idea to see what all your choices are. That it's kind of like ordering off menu. And I think there's 4 races for Fayette County, or at least that have write-in candidates. Some are the more local races, but then also the 6th congressional, I think, has a write-in, and then also the Senate race, I think, also has a write-in candidate, or actually 2 write-in candidates. Yeah, so I'll throw that link in the chat so you can check it out. At least for Fayette County, if you are living in another county, you would have to check with your county clerk. But most of the county clerk sites will have the candidates that have filed on their website. So, and they've been pretty good about posting that information. And if it's not posted on their website, you can always call their office and find out who those candidates are.
Yeah, Marcia was just saying in the chat about asking at your polling place for a list of the write-in candidates. You can do that. They will not say, here's the list as you walk in, but you can ask for it and they should have it.
Yeah, that is a good point. It's interesting that it's against the law for them to post it, which I think is strange, but.
Right. Okay, let's see, where are we? Let's talk again about what we've gotten to this a little bit about what voting really means to you. And Ashley, you hadn't been able to vote for a while. So, what does that feel like for you to be able to do that? And we'll ask everybody that question.
Sorry, my child found me. Go. So it was a
He can be in the picture if that will help him. I don't know if it will.
Sorry.
There he
Can
is.
you say hi?
Hi, buddy.
Can you wave? Okay, thank you. So it was actually a really big deal. I sent Zitzi the article that my sister wrote in the Richmond Register about it. I told her that the day that I got to vote again, I was going to buy myself balloons. And I did do that. It was a little celebration for myself because it was a big deal. And also something that was really touching to me that my sister did while I couldn't vote, I wanted to share this, was that she would always ask me every year if I could vote, who I would vote for. And although she didn't base her decision on who I said, it just made it feel important to me that even though I couldn't vote, that somebody heard me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is nice. That's great. Very good. Okay, thanks, Ashley. Logan, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can. And I think one thing that when we kind of talk about what like does voting mean for you, or like why do people vote, or why don't people vote, I think a lot of it is kind of around as like centered around is like, what is your vote, and like, does your vote even matter? And so a lot of times I think even I have like questioned that of like, out of all of the people in, whether it be like the US or Kentucky, and especially in these large races, like how impactful will my vote be? And so, um, I think on the grand scheme of things that can look kind of intimidating, but especially when you get to a very local level, I think your vote definitely really matters. And at the very least, it just is kind of showing like, you feel strongly about this. And so you kind of have your voice, and kind of like, what you stand for. And so with that, I think at the like core of it is just your like participation in your community. And so whether, whichever way you're voting, you have that I guess that responsibility to do that. And so not a lot of people have that. And so I guess what I'm getting to is, yes, your vote matters, even though a lot of people kind of think like, they look at the grand scheme of things and think, oh, like in Kentucky, it might not matter because it usually votes this way or it votes that way. But in reality, I think your vote and what you choose to do with that can have a large impact. And how you know, kind of even you can vote, but there's also a lot of other things that you can do. Whether you are like going out in your community and trying to make change or advocate and stuff. So I think, voting is one way to kind of make your voice heard, and there's a lot of other ways as well. But yeah.
Great. Thanks, Logan. All right, Michael, do you have some other things to add to what you
Yeah,
said?
I think, the rule should be you don't get to complain if you haven't voted. And so, as fewer and fewer people vote, your vote really matters, really becomes very important. And especially, I agree with Logan in the local races, where outcomes may be determined by a handful of votes, who wins, who loses. So being engaged is so critically important, and actually making a plan. And despite some challenges, I think voting is easier now. We do have access to early voting, whether it's through the mail or in person, and then actually showing up on the day of the voting, which is going to be challenging a little bit, I think, this time, because I heard the Secretary of State say that by law, we only get 2 minutes in the booth. So we only have to, we actually have to study up our ballots, which are extra long this time around.
Good point. Zitzi, I know you'd like to kind of open this up to everybody and let other people give their input tonight. So how should we do?
Yeah. Well, I was just wondering if anyone else had questions for Ashley, for Michael, or Logan.
I have a question.
Sharon, yeah.
Yeah, this is for Ashley, and maybe I missed it, but in hearing everybody's stories about how they came to the point where they registered to vote and then became voters. I know, Ashley, you said you learned that that you actually could vote about the governor's order and so forth. But how did you find out about that, and how did you get it translated from hearing that information to actually getting registered and moving forward? Was there anybody who sort of led the way, or did you do it all on your own? How did it work out?
Yeah, I mean, I actually had heard about it throughout the news. And like I said, my sister was a journalist for the Richmond Register. She's a journalist for the Lexington Herald now, but she was specifically a government journalist. So voting is a big deal for her. And so this is an exciting thing for both of us. And so she and I were kind of in a partnership together, and it was a celebration for both of us. So she was telling me, the ins and outs of everything. And just when my diversion was over from my felony. So basically diversion is like where you do the probation, and I did diversion for 5 years, which means it's people, mostly employers, aren't able to see that I had a felony. So I knew that once that was over, that I'd be able to vote. it was just a big deal. It was a big thing for my sister and I. So this is something that we kind of, I don't know, this is kind of a bond thing that we share together. It's a big deal for both of us.
It's interesting how in these stories there's the personal contact that seems to be so important to kind of getting people to make that step, to register or, to actually go to the polling place and so forth. So there's a lesson here for me, I think, in terms of the importance of just getting the word out individually.
Yeah,
So
well,
thank
I
you.
think too, I shared the column that my sister wrote. And I think that maybe if, like, I'm open to Zitzi sharing that with everybody, if anybody's interested in seeing it. So my sister is 12 years younger than I am. So when she was younger, I would just always telling her the importance of voting. So I don't know. I just think it's a great story. It's just something that we share that's, I don't know, important to both of us.
It's neat. Neat.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? We talked a little bit, I think Logan might have said this about.
Mary, sorry, it looked like Teresa had
Oh,
unmuted.
I'm sorry.
Well, it wasn't a question, it was a comment in
Okay.
relation to what Logan was saying is whether your vote counts. I lived in Prestonsburg several years ago, and Jerry Fannin was running for mayor, and he was elected by one vote. One vote made the difference.
Mhm.
And he said it was just amazing the number of people who came up to him and said, "You owe me. I'm the one who put you in office." Bum, bum. But there's an example, does your vote count? Yes, it does. It really does. So that's an example. One vote and he got mayor. He was mayor. So, okay.
That's a great example. I was actually going to say something similar, and I can't, unlike you, I can't give a real specific, but I know we've talked before in the league and during programs when we've heard people talk about how there have been, even in Fayette County, several races where the margin was just several votes, So it really, if you miss out, you could be the one that pushed somebody over the line if you actually voted. So it's a good thing to remember and to remind other people.
And I also want to mention, I put the voting results from the primary election in the chat. And you can see for some of the council races, there's 350,000 people that live in Lexington, right? Or about. And for like some of the council races, like there was only a total of like 1,500 or maybe 3,000 votes. And so it's just a very, very small percentage of people that are not only just voting for the top big name races, but going all the way down the ballot. And as Michael mentioned, the ballot is really long, really long. There's, I think, 17 judicial races or 16 or something. Anyway, there's a lot of judicial races.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there a reason why we vote on a Tuesday? Why was it designated on a Tuesday? I know my son lives in Germany. They vote on Sundays so that people are available to vote. And how many people in this country can't because they're working, and now we have early voting. It's gotten better, but for many years it wasn't like that. So I just, I think we would have a bigger response if it were on a Sunday or a Saturday. Yeah.
I don't have any knowledge about that, but there's a lot of, we're not the only state or whatever that has Tuesday voting, obviously.
It's national.
Right, national.
Yeah,
So, and I don't know what the history of that is.
Why they would do it Tuesday, a day that everybody's working. Why would you pick a day like that? So.
Good question.
I'd say look to history, white working property owners getting to vote, and probably a good question for Heather Cox Richardson, a historian.
We'll have to ask someone. We have several historians that we've had programs from, so maybe we can get them to tell us about that.
I was curious, Logan, Michael, Ashley, you talked about um, sort of how you prepare in terms of like doing this, like like what I would call a lot of like research cognitive type work. And I'm wondering, to what extent are your decisions, if at all, sort of emotional decisions, right? About all of you spoke with passion about showing up to vote. And I'm just curious if that, you know, that affective piece shows up also in like who you vote for or how you stand on particular issues. And like, how important is that to you, right? Like, are you listening to that part, or are you saying like, well, no, I should make a rational, balanced decision?
Do you want me to go first?
That'd be
Yeah,
fine.
so you know, as human beings, we make decisions emotionally and justify them rationally. That's how it typically works. So if we like the candidate, we like everything about them. If we really dislike the candidate, we absolutely dislike everything about them. So yes, as much as I'd like to say that we make rational decisions, we don't. And it comes to voting. So I think the first step is realizing that we don't make rational decisions, and then you can take a step back and say, okay, you know, why do I like this candidate? And what if I didn't like this candidate? You know, what would I be looking for? So yeah, but it comes down to that emotional appeal, no question about it.
I know for me, I was researching my like local district or my council members, and so they the one that's in it right now does now have like a, I guess, competitor, like a opponent, I guess, and so they kind of laid them side by side, and really and truly, they didn't alter on too much. There was like a few things that they kind of not even necessarily disagreed about, but kind of had different ideas of how to approach it. And so I think in that sense of, you know, where does the emotions play in? Well, personally, I know my council member. They, you know, I have more like relationship with them. So more than likely, I'm gonna, you know, vote for someone that you know personally. And so same with a few other candidates. You know, if you know, I think if you have a personal connection with them, that can sometimes go further than maybe like what they say they're running on. Just because you can kind of you know the people that you know, and so you know, if it's going to come down to it, you can kind of trust them more than someone that says they're going to do something and may never follow through with it. So I think, you know, definitely having those, you know, personal connections plays a role in who you vote for as well.
I don't know if Ashley wants to jump in, but something that affected me last week, Sharon Stewart and I and Brittany Struby went to the at-large candidates forum that was held by Civic Lex downtown at the Arts Center. And talking about that personal connection, not that you get to know someone by just going into a room and hearing them speak, but it's a really nice, you know, even I love our Zooms, but still just being in that room with them and seeing how they present themselves and, you know, how they respond to people's questions and everything. That's a real, you know, gives you a little bit more of a personal feel for how they think. And I don't know, that it was, I really enjoyed doing it. I thought it was great. So anyway, that's my perspective.
Didn't they have ice cream at that one? That's also worth it, right?
Yes.
They did gelato. Very good. And other
Like
food.
coffee and donuts.
They did have some nice food there. It was very nice.
Ashley, what about you?
I mean, I think just like Michael was sharing, it's almost impossible to not base decisions on emotions. Typically, because I'm in a situation that I'm in, I'm always more prone to candidates that have shared experiences with me, whether it's through family or themselves. And of course, I make decisions emotionally. I'm a female.
Thanks, Ashley.
So going back to Sharon put this in the chat about this. We were talking about Tuesday voting, and she found this on the internet that the answer stems from the agrarian makeup of 19th century America. In the 1800s, most citizens worked as farmers and lived far from the polling place. Since people often traveled at least a day to vote, lawmakers needed to allow a 2-day window for election day. Weekends were impractical since most people spent Sundays in church, and Wednesday was market day for farmers. So with this in mind, Tuesday was selected as the first and most convenient day of the week to hold elections. Farm culture also explains why election day always falls in November. Spring and early summer elections were thought to interfere with planting season, and late summer and early fall elections overlapped with the harvest. So that left late fall month of November after the harvest is complete, but before the arrival of harsh winter weather. Yeah, so I guess that makes a lot of sense.
It does.
Thanks, Sharon, for looking that up.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. And I think to go back to Michael's point, it's illustrative about like who this was designed for, right? And the times that sort of we set up voting and sort of how now we experience it. I will say, as long as I have the floor, instead of putting up slides, the last few things that we had wanted to share with everyone, just I think everyone in this group is clear on these, but election day this year is Tuesday, November 8th. Local precincts will be open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And if you don't know where your polling place is, you can go to elect.ky.gov and find where your voting place is. We do have, for those of you who are in Lexington, we do have early voting, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Sorry, jump in. Someone want to say something? No, okay. On November 3rd, 4th, and 5th at the Lexington Senior Center. And please don't forget to bring your photo ID when you go to vote. So that can be your Kentucky State government ID, like a driver's license, a passport, a military ID, a college or university ID, or a local form of identification. So I guess any other questions, comments, thoughts?
This is, I'm sorry, somebody else.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think that early voting is probably statewide, because in Scott County it is the same.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
It is. I was
Those
just
are part of the, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, this is a very irrelevant comment, but I just thought back to how people talked about Nixon and Kennedy on TV, and about how, you know, Kennedy was so good looking and Nixon was kind of sweating, and, you know, all of that kind of thing. So talking about the emotional appeal of a candidate, again, that's a great example of it.
They turned up the heat specifically so Nixon would sweat. Truly, they did, but yeah.
Did they?
Well, and it is emotion, but I think you also look at a candidate. A lot of times you're a one topic voter, but I think you look for people who identify with your beliefs, your character. That's really what you're going for a lot of times between the 2 or 3 different people. It's just not just how they vote on one item or 2 items, but really who they are as a person. I think those are the choices I think that you make, most people use. That's the emotional side of it.
Well, and my favorite analogy, I mean, it's really not even an analogy. I don't know why, because we've gotten so far away from this, but this is a job interview process. They're applying to do a job. And so, you know, making sure that people are qualified to do the job that we're asking them to do. So yeah, so it's really interesting. Just like having a big sign or being more popular or whatever doesn't really have anything to do with, can you balance a budget? Can you like do these things that are required of you? And can you make sure that voters have voting information on the websites? So anyway, it's Yeah, it's interesting because in some ways we don't really think of it in those terms. I don't think, I think it's more of like, oh, this person's with this party or that party or whatever, but it's really what it comes down to is a skill set to be able to perform a function in our government.
And Jen, this is Sharon, but what I would add on to that is, I think you're right. Your point is well taken. Sometimes we probably need to learn more about what the jobs really are. I assume I know what an office is sometimes, and sometimes I'm wrong about the scope of what it is that they are to be doing and what they need to be able to do. So there's really two parts to that we all need to be paying attention to.
And there's some information about that on Vote 411, right?
Absolutely.
One thing I'll add, Jen, I take your point is really well taken that sort of this is a job interview. The other thing I think about too, and someone else brought up sort of the type of democracy we have, right? Something I'm always thinking about is like, basically we're entrusting this person to go make decisions for us, right? Like I'm not gonna show up and vote on everything that the water board is considering or a city council is considering. And in part, I asked that question about emotion because I've noticed it's an important part of my decision making, right? Like, what does this person seem like in a stressful situation? Are they going to make decisions in the way that I would like to think about? You know, are they going to look at the same kind of information? I'm looking for all of these like proxy information of like what kind of decision maker this is, because there are their stated platforms, and then there are all kinds of things that are going to come up that none of us anticipate, right? And so I'm trying to figure out, like I'm trying to play some mind games sometimes, I feel like, as a voter. And for me anyway, I've noticed a lot of that is driven by like, how do I feel about this person as a candidate? And so I was just trying to see if other people out there thought the same way as well. And I'm glad to hear that you all are also thinking about your emotional reactions to people.
Fundamentally, the job is just too difficult to figure out, you know, as if you're trying to do this job interview thing. I mean, even in the real world, you do interview a person, you don't know how they're going to perform until they're actually in the job. And so, yeah, it's a bit of a song and dance, but we try to make the best of it. And yeah, if we can, you know, go beyond one issue and understand the impact of our emotions, I think we can be better voters and better citizens.
Good.
One thing I do want to mention is that mail-in voting, although everybody kind of enjoyed it during the pandemic, it actually isn't an option for everybody now. It's limited. And so one of the things I think that makes it super confusing, although we have 4 ways to vote, there are, you know, there's mail-in, and but you have to not be able to vote on election day or any of the early voting days or the early, like excused in-person absentee voting, which started on Wednesday and is going on right now, to be able to or have something else that's going on that you are qualify for that mail-in ballot. Now for the in-person absentee voting, you also have to have an excuse, but it's a slightly different set of excuses than for mail-in voting. And then the easy part is early voting, and that's where everybody can take advantage of that. So that just makes it really simple. But do know that, like, if people want to, if they like show up to the polls tomorrow, but you don't qualify, you're not going to be able to vote. So just wait till next week, and then you can go on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday and vote then. So that's, you know, we kind of came out of the pandemic. We sort of had this option where the majority of people were using mail-in for voting. A lot of people liked it, but now that's scaled back to only certain people can do that. And then, but we did get this expansion of early voting for the 3 days. Now this kind of in-person absentee voting, I don't know why it's always so confusing to me. Why do you call it in-person absentee at the same time? Like you keep here and not here. Anyway, it's that has actually been quite limited. It used to be you could do that for like over 21 days prior to the election, and now there's just 6 days of that. You know, it is difficult to keep track of these things because it seems like, particularly in the last couple of years, the major voting laws have changed for all of the fall elections, and particularly if you're a brand new voter. So Logan, you've had a tough time. You like thought you got it down, and then it's got changed again. So that can be difficult to track. But the League of Women Voters, we try to make sure, I'm chair of voter services for the Lexington League and also for the state league. And so that's part of my job of volunteering with the league, is making sure that our website has the information that is up to date. We really try to make sure that we've got, you know, everything there. In fact, know that the State Board of Elections does not have the early in-person absentee voting locations on their website. So you may have to call your county clerk and find out what those are.
So Jen, for a little bit of trivia, when we were at our session last week with Don Blevins, he said that the problem with that funky wording is that in the state constitution, there's 1 day for voting, and that's Tuesday, you know, in our case, the 8th. So you have to come up with some name other than just say early voting. It's got to be absentee voting or something that gets around the Constitution. So there you go.
They should do it like parking at like UK football games. Like, here's the green zone, the blue zone, and the purple zone. Like it just, but it's yeah, because it's kind of funny. So in fact, in sort of doing our voting rights basics, we sort of abbreviate it to the early voting, because that's kind of essentially what it is, although technically in the Constitution it's not called that, but it functions in that way. And then it's still kind of awkward, this like extra early option. Yeah, I wish there was a like simple term. I was actually kind of joking about that we should make some like an alphabet soup, but it's kind of like, well, which way do you call it? Like let's see, IPEA. Anyway, it was like kind of crazy to even come up with a mnemonic for it to make it short and easy. But so Marcia, do you want to share? You're going to be a new poll worker, so do you want to share a little bit about what your training was like for being an election worker?
Oh, sure. So I'm actually signed up as an alternate, although I was told that it was a very high chance that I would actually be working, because in the May primaries, they used all their alternates. It was a 2.5-hour training where you go over kind of an overview of all the different positions, some of the different rules. I put my materials in the other room, but we have several books and all we have to familiarize ourselves with. And then we did a training on the electronic, and I don't know if all of the precincts are doing it with an iPad, where you use it on the iPad and then you'll, I guess, print out and feed into the ballot counter. And I'm not using the right terms at all, or the ballot that goes into the ballot box. But I tell you, one of the things that I really was struck with was how very regulated and secure things were. Things like, let's say you mess up your ballot, they give you away the nobody working in the polls ever touches your ballot. They give you an envelope and you have a specific place in a locked box where you get rid of that, but you're not allowed to have another ballot in your hand until you destroy that old one. So things like that, things, and just some other things that there's just a lot of checks and balances. So we'll see. I still wish we would have our polls open a little bit later than 6 p.m. because I think for a lot of people with some jobs, it's difficult. But the training was very good, and it was like drinking out of a fire hose. And we went over everything from how pollsters can be to how you set up in the beginning. I mean, pollsters, I'm sorry, where people can stand if they're going to talk about an issue and it's not considered electioneering. Like, you don't want to have people in line discussing Amendment 1 or 2 as to whether the pros and cons. They may be asked to discuss that outside past the 100 feet or whatever. So I was very impressed with how the whole process works, and I'm excited.
So I had a quick question. How much did they go over like the photo ID thing? Because that's something that concerns me, is that for people who may have like an expired license, which is valid to use for voting.
Yes,
but
it is.
But then also, like, if you don't have the ID, like signing an affirmation, or if the poll worker knows you, like, because I know the guy that lives down the street, they work our polls in our district. So, but those things have changed a little bit, and so I just wonder if that's going to be a barrier for people, that they may not want to. I'm just afraid people will be like, oh, well, you don't have like the ID, and you're not allowed to vote. And I think it's, I guess, to empower people to be like, I can vote, like, give me the affirmation, like, let me sign the paper.
We went over that quite extensively. And one of the things that they said to us was, you never turn a voter away. If there is any question, we are to call now I'm in Scott County, we are to call the clerk's office. But it was driver's license, as you said, any private college, postgraduate, a technical school, passport, any federal, also any ID issued by any city government, county government, urban government, charter county, and an expired license is acceptable. And then if they only have a social security card, then there's a form that they can just bring and fill out that. You can even use a credit card, and you have to sign, there's a form you have to have of that. So if you have some kind of credit card, or a debit card, you can use that. And then of course the personal acquaintance. So it was stressed to us that if somebody brings in an ID and you're not too sure what to do, or you have a question, you start working through everything that you can enable them to vote. Now, I do not know if that is how every person working those polls handles that, but that is how the training says that you should handle it. So if somebody is turned away and is kind of sloughed off and said, well, we can't take that, then there's an issue there. And I apologize for my cat.
That's okay. Well, I'm really proud of you, Marcia, for volunteering to be a poll worker, and it sounds like that you're going to be a diligent and making sure that people are able to vote. So
well, I hope so. I mean, I tell you, my experience, I've always voted, but honestly, with how things have been going with the last several years, and as I'm seeing things going on in our things going, I think it's really important that we all get involved in this, because our democracy is a very precious thing. So
yeah, well, I love that note to end on. Thank you for the work you're doing, Marcia. I really appreciate it. And thank you to Logan and Ashley and Michael. It's really great to hear your perspectives, and thanks everyone for a really lovely conversation. Hope you all have a wonderful night, and please vote and tell everyone else too that you know as well.
Yes.